Today, we're looking at a purple ink by Visconti. Purple. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below so that if you're in a hurry, you can skip around. But if you got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram, and if you're new here, I would invite you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Pilot vanishing point with a medium nib, wrote with it for a day, and used it to take the notes for this video. This first writing sample is done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper in order to have some kind of standardization to look at. There's additional writing samples later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I've had this ink in bottle form a couple of times, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is significantly lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 8 seconds to dry. Medium's quite a bit darker than the extra fine, about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 13 seconds to dry. I'm not seeing any color variation in the scrubby. There's really not in the writing. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is significantly lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 8 seconds to dry. The medium is quite a bit darker than the extra fine, just a tad lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. 15 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows no color variation. We didn't expect it. We didn't get it. And Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 stub has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. 7 seconds to dry. Now the medium is a little bit darker than the extra fine, just a tad lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. 6 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us no real color variation. We weren't expecting it and weren't getting it here. I agree with Vita that we can learn a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see is this purple that really just works its way up. It's a true purple. It's not a blended out purple. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. Now they both have this kind of line across the bottom. The one that dried traveled a little bit farther. I think it's a matter of a few seconds longer in the water. There's really no difference between these two, which makes me say I'm really not expecting any kind of holdout on this ink. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, we know not to use this in a note-taking situation if you want to go back and highlight your notes. Now, looking at the water, it starts to look like there's not a lot, but if you take a look, you see these 3 little specks of white coming through. That's where the white of the paper is just beginning to come through, meaning water's all that it should really take to get this out of your pen. If you really wanted to use the pen flush, if you look, you can see how that tracked its way around past the highlighter down towards the bleach. It got a little messy, but you see an area there where you really start to see the white of the paper begin coming through at about the 9 o'clock position. Now, that means if for some reason the water didn't do it, the pen flush certainly will.
If you really wanted to go the route of the 1/3 bleach solution, it does completely obliterate that ink, taking it entirely off the page, but there's no need to use bleach to get this out of your pen.
I test ink viscosity or flow by using a tilt test, and I'll link that somewhere here. And for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Put the data onto a bell curve or standard deviation for it to be easily understood.
Visconti's Purple has a viscosity of 1.56, making this a very wet ink, in the red zone red.
To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those, and what I found is the average dry time is 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds.
Visconti's Purple has an average dry time of 10 seconds, making this a faster drying ink. Instead of finding inks that look like Visconti's Purple, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page, and I wanted a nice orange. I chose Diamine Orange because it's named Orange.
The second writing sample is done on Nimacine paper, a Leuchtturm 1917 journal, and on a composition notebook like you would use in science class.
Here we're looking at it on the Nimacine paper. And this paper I truly do love. I don't get to use it enough because it's very expensive for a notebook. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. Now the extra fine is a significantly lighter tone than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 4 seconds to dry. Medium's quite a bit darker than the extra fine and quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 6 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us not really any color variation. We're really not getting it with this ink. The color variation we get is much more having to do with nibs. Leuchtturm 1917 notebook. Now, we have no bleeding. We do have the most minor of show-through, nothing that would stop you from using the back of the paper. The 1.1, all that messiness was me, not something going on with the ink. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. Now the extra fine, again, significantly lighter than the stub. We're seeing a lot of this. The variation of the color has to do with that nib. The extra fine has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 12 seconds to dry. The medium is quite a bit darker than the extra fine and quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, and 15 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows no color variation, we got none. The scrubby of the medium, far left to far right, does show color variation, but it did not show up in the writing samples. Here I'm looking at it on a cheap composition notebook, like what you would use in your school science class. And the scrubby starts to have some bleed through. The medium has some ghosting, but the extra fine does fantastic on here. Really very good. So the medium has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. Just a nice dark purple. The extra fine, while it is quite a bit lighter than the medium, has no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 3 seconds to dry. Great for in a lab. The scrubby shows no real color variation. We weren't expecting and we weren't getting. I just wanted to see how well it would do on supposedly bad paper. That is all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Visconti Purple? This is the first purple ink that I purchased, and I'm on to my second bottle of it. It really opened my eyes up to what a purple ink should be and how it should look. I really have enjoyed using this ink. Again, second bottle. It's fantastic. What pen and nib would give the best writing experience with this ink? We have two choices. You can go with dry and get a much lighter tone, or wet and a much darker tone. For me, it's the wet, darker tone that this ink puts down that really stands out and looks great. I do new ink reviews every single day, so if you're new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.